So, welcome once again. Thank you very much for your patience and sorry to make you wait. My name is Nikos Papakostas and I'm the co-founder of Interalia, the organization that is behind this conference. Back in 2019, when we were putting together the idea for this conference to apply for the Europe for Citizens program, the civil society grants that is supporting this series of conferences in different parts of Europe, we hardly thought that it would be as relevant and important as it is today. We only thought that the idea of a stronger engagement of local authorities and civil societies in dealing with crucial questions for the future of European political communities, such as the migrant question, is much closer to our vision for Europe.
Nikos, you are muted.
Yes, now I am unmuted. Apologies for that. Hopefully we will catch the pace. I was referring to our initial concept, an idea for putting together this series of conferences and to emphasize on the...
Να δώσουμε έμφαση στην τοπική διακυβέρνηση, στο τοπικό επίπεδο.
Stronger engagement of local authorities and of
Έτσι λοιπόν είδαμε τη κοινωνία των πολιτών, την εμπλοκή της τοπικής αυτοδιοίκησης, χρήσιμα κομμάτια για το μέλλον των ευρωπαϊκών κοινοτήτων, όπως για παράδειγμα το μεταναστευτικό. Όλα αυτά είναι πολύ εγκύτερα στο όραμά μας για την Ευρώπη και για την ευρωπαϊκή ολοκλήρωση σε σχέση με το μονοπόλιο το οποίο συζητάμε για την εφαρμογή πολιτικής από τις εθνικές κυβερνήσεις. Έπειτα ήρθε η πανδημία, ενέσκυψε προφανώς και υπογράμμισε με τον πλέον οδυνηρό και σοκαριστικό τρόπο, κάτι που συνεχίζει να το κάνει άλλωστε, γιατί μια πολιτική Ευρώπη θα έπρεπε να υπάρχει και υπό ποιο όραμα θα πρέπει να λειτουργεί. Η σπουδαιότητα της ολοκλήρωσης, του πολιτικού θάρρους, θέλους, διαμοιρασμού των ευθυνών, η αλληλεγγύη, αλλά και φυσικά η αρχή της επικουρικότητας είναι οι αρχές της λήψης αποφάσεων στο χαμηλότερο δυνατό επίπεδο. Με άλλα λόγια, το επίπεδο που είναι εγκύτερα στους πολίτες. Υπάρχουν πολλά μαθήματα που μπορούν να αντληθούν από την τρέχουσα συγκυρία και πιστεύω ότι κάποια εξ αυτών θα αναφερθούν, θα συζητηθούν από τους ομιλητές και μέσα από τις ανοιχτές διαδικασίες του συνεδρίου. Επίσης, ας ελπίσουμε ότι οι εθνικές κυβερνήσεις θα πάρουν κάποια κομμάτια από αυτά και θα αναζητήσουν τα δικά μας συμπεράσματα και φυσικά ίσως να αναθεωρήσουν την δική τους πολιτική ή τις πολιτικές τους, ακόμη και σε αυτό το ύστερο στάδιο. Όλα αυτά θα συζητηθούν λεπτομερώς τις επόμενες μέρες. Επί του παρόντος, θα ήθελα να σας ευχαριστήσω άπαντες για τη συνδρομή σας, για την υπομονή σας και φυσικά να εκφράσω την ευγνωμοσύνη μου σε όλους στους υπευθύνους εδώ από τη Γερμανία. Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ γιατί έχουν πραγματικά τη συμβολή τους σε όλη αυτή την πρωτοβουλία. Είναι πολύ σημαντικό το να μιλάμε μαζί τους για το ρόλο τοπικών κυβερνήσεων και των κυβερνήσεων γενικά, έτσι ώστε οι πολιτικές να είναι αποτελεσματικές και με μια ανθρώπινη ματιά. Επίσης, ευχαριστώ το Aid to Refugees, που είναι η ηγέτηνα δύναμη για αυτή τη σειρά των 7 συνεδρίων και ελπίζω ότι θα αναζητήσουμε και θα κοιτάξουμε μαζί το καλύτερο δυνατό για να σας καλωσορίσουμε τα επόμενα 3 συνέδρια. Επιπλέον, το Human Rights 360 και το Solidarity Now, που είναι εταίροι στην Ελλάδα, που έχουν υποστηρίξει με διαφορετικούς τρόπους την πραγματοποίηση αυτού του συνεδρίου. Τώρα, για ένα λεπτό, θα ήθελα να δώσω το λόγο στον τεχνικό μας υπεύθυνο, τον κύριο Αντών Μιχαλογιάννη, για κάποιες λεπτομέρειες για την ομαλή λειτουργία αυτού του ψηφιακού συνεδρίου. Αντώνη.
Actually, the man of the hour, not only because it is up to him that this conference works out as we planned, but also because it's his birthday. Adonis, χρόνια πολλά. Happy birthday. The floor is yours for a briefing to our participants about technical aspects of the conference.
Okay, hello from me too. Sorry for the difficult start of the conference. We were blocked out some essential features for the conference to take place as we wanted to. I hope everything keeps moving as planned, and whatever other technical difficulty you may experience on your side, you can always send something in the chat or on my email address that you already have, and we will try to solve it as soon as possible. I hope you have a great conference and to have the outputs each one of you wants to have from it. Thank you.
Thank you, Adonis. Now I would like to give the floor just for a brief word to our interpreters, the team of podium interpreters, and Mr. Kaklamanis to give an input about your seamless participation for the users of the interpretation service.
A globe icon next to share screen. So it should say there, interpretation, and you need to click on English. Is it okay? Can you find the globe icon next to the share screen? You must choose English from there so that you will be able to listen to the English interpreting. Thank you, and I'm switching back to Greek for the Greek participants.
All right. Before going into our first panel, let me just introduce the chair, who will later introduce the speakers to the first panel. He's Sotiris Petropoulos. He's an assistant professor at the University of the Peloponnese and a co-founder of HIGS, an initiative aiming to empower non-profit organizations and through them civil society in Athens and Greece. Sotiris, the floor is yours. I wish a good conference to everyone.
Thank you very much, Nikos. Good morning, everybody. Many thanks for the invitation and the honor you made me to take part in this very, very interesting conference. I hope we have a good conference. And I'm also excited for the panel I'm actually moderating. The title is The Migrant Question and the Principle of Subsidiarity, Tensions and Rapprochements. Overall, it is around what we have been witnessing, especially in Greece, but also across Europe on the issue of migration and this flow of people that are coming around the world, and what has been the response from the part, especially of municipalities, of the European Union in general, and of municipalities in particular. Some questions have been posed regarding the institutional and financial instruments on the EU level that could secure the active engagement of municipalities in this crisis and enhance the potential for social cohesion, as well as whether the principles of subsidiarity on behalf of the European Commission has been appropriate as a response to the development that we have seen since at least 2015. Without taking more of the time, I think that the panel is a very strong one and appropriate to cover the topic. So I would like to present you Mr. Niels Tubing, who is a senior policy advisor on city integration of migrants and refugees, Mr. George Sarelakos, Cities Network for Integration Project Manager and UHCR, Mr. Damian Boeselager, if I pronounce it correctly, who is a member of the European Parliament from the Greens EFA group in the European Parliament, and last but not least, Mr. Epaminodas Farmakis, the representative of Common Ground Greece. I would like to start by giving the floor to Mr. Tubing. Mr. Tubing.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Great, perfect. Well, then I start. Thank you very much for inviting me here, inter alia, and Nikos in particular. I think it's a very important question we're addressing here in this conference, and an issue that will become only more pressing in the coming years. I decided to tell a little bit about the situation in the Netherlands with regards to subsidiarity and the position of Amsterdam in that sense. When you look in the history of the Netherlands in the last roughly 35 years, I think there have been three main turning points with regard to subsidiarity, in the sense that national power of legislation was decentralized to local governments, to municipalities. Quite recently, in 2015, we had quite a large decentralization on the social field, on youth care, also social services, with the idea that municipalities are a lot closer to the citizens to the national level, which is true, of course. The downside was that it was also cloaked cutback, like a budgetary cutback. So the legislation and obligations came to the municipalities, but not always with the necessary funding. So there were quite some issues and problems that are still lingering today. A lot longer ago, in 1985-86,
είχαμε μια σημαντική επίσης αλλαγή της νομοθεσίας.
And the ones that got a status, the asylum status holders, were centered around the large cities in the Netherlands. And through the idea of burden sharing, the idea was then to divide status holders across the Netherlands, across all the different municipalities. And then depending how large the municipality is, the larger, the more refugees they had to take in. And in that sense, Amsterdam is the largest city in the Netherlands, so you have like the most refugees. In 2015, with the refugee influx being very high in Europe, also in the Netherlands, we got a lot of newcomers in Amsterdam. And we had to act on that because they were living in our cities, they were coming to our streets, so we had to help them and assist them. And we started our current Amsterdam approach to status holders, asylum status holders, which pretty means that we had more dedicated case managers. We started their integration and the guidance right away from the first day, within the possible boundaries of legislation, because there was a national Civic Integration Act, which states that language courses and trying to pass the exams of integration was the responsibility of the refugees themselves, the newcomers. But with guidance to work, helping them find their way in the city, we immediately started guiding them from the beginning they got into our city. And that was partially funded with some national money, some European money through the ESF funds, and a lot of city money. We put in almost like 10 million euros a year for the first couple of years. So that's, I think, when we're talking about subsidiarity, it's also an important thing to take into account. The infrastructure and the opportunities have to be there to build something within the city, both political, financial, maybe historical even. A third important decentralization is coming up next year, if all goes well. The Civic Integration Act I just mentioned, which pretty much states that newcomers, including asylum status holders, have to learn the language and pass certain exams to be able to get a long staying permit, for example, in the Netherlands, or obtain a Dutch passport. And if they don't oblige to all those regulations and pass the exams, they can get fines even. Which in the last couple of years was like a national legislation and responsibility of the newcomers themselves that will go back to the municipalities again, which means that we as a city have more tools to guide the newcomers straight away. On one hand, help them integrate more quickly, find jobs more quickly, and also prevent them from going into debt or getting fines. So we're quite happy with that on the municipal level, but it's quite a struggle at the same time with the national government, like to which extent will we be in charge as municipalities? Which information will we all get? Which elements will still be the own responsibility of newcomers? So it's quite a difficult but very interesting conversation we have with the national government, but they do realize that we indeed are better equipped to assist newcomers on the local level. I think I already mentioned like money and financing. When we look at subsidiarity on a European level, I think the European Commission can definitely assist in that through funding. I mean, European legislation is a bit more difficult. We see it with the Migration Pact and the Action Plan on Inclusion. They have a lot of overarching themes. They try to guide member states to act certain directions, but many member states have quite a different attitude or outlook on how to deal with migration and integration, while cities all around Europe have a more pragmatic and practical view almost. The people are living within their city or their municipality. They become regular citizens, like the local citizens who are already there, and we have to enable them to be able to participate in life and get jobs and everything. And of course, there are quite a lot of funding programs, such as AMIF or ESF that already mentioned, but often those go through the member states as well. And member states decide which specific focus there will be in the programs. There are, of course, also direct programs and calls that you can apply as municipality or as NGO, but it's often a lot of administrative burden, a lot of red tape. And when you look at the topics, you see is a lot of focus on innovative approaches, for example, doing new things. And I think with integration, we're talking about people, human beings. And I think there are a lot of programs that have proven themselves to work and to really help. And it's not like a new product that has to be innovated all the time. So we, as the city of Amsterdam, try to focus a bit more on, we should get funding on programs that work, make them more sustainable, because integration isn't something that happens in the first few months. Integration is a very long-term issue, maybe even over generations. So more direct access to those funds and more a focus on sustainable integration, I think would really help cities to focus on integration. On the European level, they can already also help with the subsidiarity principle. Like I said, it's not always possible to do the same programs in every city throughout Europe. There are different political backgrounds, different infrastructure, different finances. So you can't really copy the Amsterdam approach, for example, in exactly the same way to Athens or another city. But I think on the European level, we can also look, when we're talking about rapprochements, to connect cities and see how they can assist or help each other in different ways even. Can be financial. We can also look, for example, in finding legal pathways for resettlement, like taking in extra refugees or from cities. Maybe work towards some engaged pathways between sister cities in that sense. But also exchange of knowledge or help out in education or maybe labor migration, building houses. So it's, I think, a different question of a difficult question in overall in Europe. How can we work towards making subsidiarity connect to like solidarity as well? I think that's an important question in the coming years as well, between cities, but also between cities and the European Commission and the European Parliament as well. So I think that's something that we definitely should be working on in the coming years to increase those collaborations as well. I'll leave it at this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I take note of the very interesting overview you gave us on the developments in the Netherlands, as well as this interaction between the national, local, and then the main target audience, i.e. the people in movement. And I think that the final thing that you mentioned about the solidarity between the cities, about exchange of best practices, it is something that we have also seen in the last AMIF call on the European level. And I think that this connectivity among some of the main stakeholders on all this situation is something very important. And I think that our next speaker's experience, Mr. Sarlerakos, will be quite revealing also on that regard. So, Mr. Sarlerakos, if you would like to get the floor.
Good morning to everyone. Nice to see you, Sotiris. So following Neil's presentation, I would say that it's a really nice, it gives me the opportunity to present the reality of Greece, taking into account that on 2015, about 850,000 refugees passed by Athens and Greece. I think it's really useful to see what happened back then in order to understand what the progress 5 years later. So back then, it was clear that the municipalities and the state weren't really prepared for addressing such challenges, meaning that there were no procedures, no tools, and no plan at national level. As a result, the municipalities had to face the consequences and all the challenges related to the refugees flow without being in coordination or without being part of an holistic national plan. As a result, back then, the municipality of Athens realized that had to develop tools and procedures in order to face similar challenges. As a result, on 2017, the Athens Coordination Center was established in order to manage all challenges appearing in the municipality of Athens. I would say that even back then, the rest of the municipalities in Greece that started to realize the impact of changing conditions expressed the interest for developing similar mechanisms or being part of an holistic network. As a result, on January of 2018, the municipality of Athens and Thessaloniki signed a memorandum of cooperation based on the integration aspects. 2 months later, 11 more municipalities joined the city's network for integration. And 2 years later, like now, we can see that 18 municipalities are participating in this network. We could say that as a first conclusion, we can see that municipalities are moving faster than the central government. It's clear because we can see that municipalities today that do participate in the city's network have an interest into developing holistic plans. I would definitely say, I would definitely recall an example. This one of developing strategy in integration strategy at local and national level. In the city's network, we can see that there is a number of municipalities that are currently developing or have developed their integration strategies, contrary to the central government that at the moment is looking forward for developing a new framework. That's a clear example of how we can see that municipalities have, let's say, more increased interest into developing local solutions, local practices. The city's network, since the establishment, worked for bringing together the municipalities, for evaluating, for assessing the needs at local level, for developing common tools for all the member municipalities, as well as developing practices, solutions at local level. So during the last 3 years, there are frequent needs assessment, and which definitely provides us concrete conclusions about the needs at timely basis, the needs of municipalities. Therefore, we can see that the member municipalities at the moment are moving in a equal basis, meaning that all members develop similar tools, while the central government at the moment, I would say, doesn't really participate in the same rhythm. However, we need to say that the efforts of the municipalities were significant, taking into account that the sustainability issue was always there. It's different when we talk about a network that has ensured funding and viability, while the reality is much more different. The municipalities tried to find funding sources in order to sustain the network. Today, we are quite happy that IOM and UNHCR are supporting the city's network. However, the member municipalities have realized that a legal entity would definitely support their efforts in the near future. That's the first thing that we should realize in order to understand how the local response is moving faster than the central response. In this context, the CNI members have lately built communication channels with the central government in order to bring forward the topics, the issues that municipalities are facing, in order to bring integration in the agenda. Let's not forget, when I listen Niels, and I know from other practice from the municipality of Amsterdam, I do know that integration was always in the main agenda of the local municipalities. Here it's a different issue. Integration is a new topic, I would say. Even 5 years after the refugee flows, integration is still a new topic. We can see that just recently the ministry appointed deputy minister on integration. That's a positive sign. However, in municipalities level, we do expect that the central government will build on the initiatives that municipalities have taken up to now, so we can move forward by developing an holistic plan. I think, Sotiris, that was a short overview of how municipalities are linked with the central government. I expect that during the QA session, we'll be able to provide more clarification.
Exactly. Thank you very much, George, for the overview you've given us. I just need to point out that I was watching the Athens Municipality Coordination Center as it evolved and how it gained momentum, and it actually put a lot of positive things in the way that at least the Athens municipality is working with on the refugee field. I take note on the exchange of best practices, the funding part, but also the need to run some advocacy sessions maybe through the the connection of cities throughout Europe that I believe that is also on the positive side. So thank you very much for that. And indeed, I think that in the Q&A that will follow, we will have the opportunity to go more in depth on the different issues involved in all that. So thank you very much. I would like now to give the floor to Mr. Boslager for his initial comment and presentation.
Thanks a lot. Thanks also for the invitation and for the organization of this very timely event, and George, for your previous words. Just as a quick note, I might have to leave after my intervention for just a couple of minutes because I have to intervene in the committee, but I will be back for the question and answers then hopefully very soon. I mean, first of all, I think that voluntary solidarity is really the key way to get out of the current situation on the European level when you think about the deadlock. So you might have heard that we, within the Green faction in the European Parliament, but also myself as Volt Europa member, we have trying to push the concept of voluntary solidarity in this debate, where we currently still see that even mandatory solidarity can't really fly. And we thought that, you know, if you look at, and what we heard also just now, all the great potential of people who actually want to, or cities and communities which actually want to welcome asylum seekers, this could really be a game changer still, we believe, for the debate as it's currently standing. And so we published a paper a year ago on this, and since then have been from the Greens basically, and have been trying to push for this concept as much as possible to really just remove all the boundaries that are currently existing that stop voluntary solidarity from taking place. We recently have started a new initiative, and I might ask you for your support on this if you're interested as well, which is trying to really change this narrative that Europe is not a welcoming continent. And so if basically our initiative is the idea that we will try to map, or we already are basically almost done with mapping all the communities across Europe which have already proclaimed that they would be willing to welcome asylum seekers. And the idea is that once we have all this voluntary potential shown on a map, we can use this in our debates and in building pressure on the European countries and the member states. But also we give a tool to all the local councillors or even all the citizens across Europe to actually change something in the debate by addressing the local councillors and their mayors and asking them to also be represented on this map by also pledging some form of voluntary solidarity, so that then this map it's already quite populated, but then it will be basically populated across all the different communities that are willing to accept asylum seekers. So this for us is really an idea of creating, if you want, of showcasing how much Europe can be a welcoming continent and how much it is ridiculous to have people suffering at our borders at this very moment when there are actually so many people out there wanting to accept asylum seekers or wanting to welcome asylum seekers. So this is for us would be a strong support in advocating, and I would be very much happy to learn more from you, to answer questions on this. And I think it's absolutely clear that from our side as the Greens EFA, but also from my side, from my office side, we always would be very happy to support you and in process, like in any form of advocacy campaigns or any other ways to ensure that we have a more welcoming asylum system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your intervention and input. Indeed, the advocacy part, I think that at least from my part, it has been a really growing movement on being more and more active from across the fields. I mean, from charities and non-profits to local politicians to municipalities, that they are, they taking a stand that are trying to somewhat ameliorate the situation. And as you said, and as I've seen in the chat, you got a very positive feedback that it is weird to not help people when we have the opportunity to do that and people wanting to work on that. I think that our next speaker, Mr. Farmakis, can give an insight further insights on, not so much on the advocacy, I guess, but also on the, to reconnect again partially on the cooperation, collaboration part. I think that in Common Grounds at the core of its values is how to enhance cooperation among different parties. So, Mr. Farmakis, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Sotiri. And I would like also to thank Nikos Papakostas and his team for the invitation and the excellent organization. And I guess you can hear my dog also on the background, who has been silent all this time, but now decided to start barking. I'm sorry for that. I listened to a very interesting presentation by Niels, George, and Damien. And I have to say to Niels that the Netherlands example has been, for us in civil society, the best case, let's say, practice and example. And as George said, the network of cities and Damien with his proposition for the advocacy network, all are very important, and we fully support that. As you mentioned, Sotiris, Common Ground is a new initiative, but has come from many years of experience from all of us involved. It really aims to bring civil society together around the vision that we want to create social change and strengthen, democracy, human rights, and environmental sustainability. Let's also be honest that our response to any major crisis in Greece over the last, maybe I would say from 2009, with the financial situation, and then we had complicated issues and the far right rhetoric and racist attacks and the criminal organization with Golden Dawn and the rising unemployment, and then the refugee, let's say, quote unquote crisis, as George eloquently described as well. Our response has been really a disaster, I have to say. I mean, from all the actors, either international or local in Greece. And I think not that there hasn't been significant work, of course, but there has been coming to Greece an amount of more than 3 billion euros from the European Union, with the problems attached to it, the political issues, and only for the refugee response. And we haven't really been able to even start talking about proper integration. And George, what he described was really the best integration efforts that we have seen in Greece. But clearly, when we see these situations of people literally around garbage and in the rain in the camps, still today, after 6 years, it's really an unacceptable situation. So I think the only solution going forward, and it's already too late, but we have to make a maximum effort, is really to collaborate. I think through collaborations, it's the only that way we can really achieve tangible results. And I think it's a failed model that we have been using in Greece for many, many years now. I have been involved for 24 years in the Greek civil society, but I dare to say that even before the situation was really not working. It's a broken system to try to go from the top to down approach, from the ministry, declaring something that has no expertise and then trying to implement it, and all of us trying to follow that. We really have to build our community work. We have to approach the local communities, and of course the municipalities are a very important big link, but we even have to dive further down to local communities and local ethnic groups and other individuals, leaders, let's say, in local communities, so that we can engage them, especially now that we will have a really quite difficult post-COVID-19, let's say, situation both in terms of financial situation in Greece and of course in social, economic, political. We have seen a lot of pressure on human rights in Greece, a lot of pressure on NGOs, as you know well, Sotiri, during this environment. And with my last comment, I want to say that as Common Ground, we are starting a new, let's say, initiative this month on the Green and Just Recovery Alliance. As you may remember, the European Union has announced a massive 750 billion euros package to lead us out of, let's say, COVID-19. In Greece, the available amount of that is about 31.5 billion approximately, plus 40 billion from another financial mechanism fund. So a total of 72 approximately billion euros, a massive amount, I have to say. And why not? It's now the opportunity to green the economy and to protect through that funding also human rights, vulnerable groups. So this initiative has been brought to Common Ground because it's a platform that works with NGOs and other stakeholders, municipalities, and generally non-governmental, non-profit groups, bringing initiative to us by Greenpeace and our good colleague Nikos Haralambidis and Natalia Tsigaridou. And the aim there is to include as many as stakeholders, not only in Greece, but in Europe, to advocate and to push for a more green and just, let's say, implementation of this funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess that the call goes into all different stakeholders, so both municipalities and non-profits, etc. So everybody who's interested, I think you could also share some details or a link through the chat. And thank you very much. I think that from the four initial discussions and ideas put forward, I take note on how we can actually understand subsidiarity in both the national and the European level. I take note on issues on funding, on national legal framework that could allow or could create more problems into mobilizing the local communities into supporting the integration of migrants. A lot of you talked about the collaboration, about how there should be a solidarity throughout the different members in this peculiar environment, especially municipalities, that there are already specific venues and the networks that are working towards that. And of course, the role of the potential role of advocacy and of campaigning in order to change things to the better. Based on that, I would like to open now the floor for a Q&A. So you're all invited to share comments as well as questions. You can do that primarily through the chat, but also I think that we could also try in an organized way to open up your microphone and put the question there. In case that you write it, please do, because I'm gonna check on the chat. Please do note if a question is addressed to a specific person in the panel, so that I can forward to that. You can send it either to everyone or directly to me. I can pass on the question. So we can start doing that. I have the privilege. I have one, two questions in mind, but I don't want to start, using the privilege of the moderator. I always try not to do that. So maybe someone. Okay, so I'm gonna go first, but maybe this will hit up a bit of the discussion. Now, you partially all mentioned a bit of the funding and how this can be the initiator. For example, I know that though there were some positive vibes from the municipality of Athens, George, it was funding that actually initiated the whole process. UNHCR is supporting the network of the cities network. That I guess is something that in a way we see in a lot of movements, and Epaminondas, you talked about how Common Ground is taking a stand based on the fact of this new funding. But I wanted to ask you whether you see the predominance or the dominance of the existence of a third party that pushes the agenda forward, or whether at the point that we are right now, you can see and witness maybe a self-motivated ecosystem that goes towards more interconnectedness and exchange of best practices and more discussions happening without actually having an initiator being either a EU funding scheme or something different. And I'm always interested to see whether the dynamics have been on the ground right now to be a in a positive cycle, self-pushing mechanism of putting everybody into discussions of how we can move forward. And I point that and I connect it a bit to the advocacy part, which usually is something that it's never funded. So you all talked a bit about also that part. So what should we expect in the years to come? And as the integration issue becomes more crucial, I guess. So if anybody, it's addressed to all four of you. So if anybody has a view on that, and then I'm already getting some questions through the chat.
Maybe I can mention something on that, Stairs.
Yes.
I think you see like a movement the last couple of years, also in the I mentioned in the action plan on inclusion from the Commission and the Migration Pact, like a shift towards community sponsorship, which might feed a little bit into that, like with third parties and building a bigger network. I think that's an interesting, interesting direction to look into. I think it's, when you look at the United States or Canada, for example, which are often referred to as good examples, I think they have a different history, at least to the Netherlands, with regards to government involvement and more like philanthropic involvement or other parties with outside local government who finance like social activities, social provisions. But I think that's something that can really feed into building a bigger network, but also more like a shared ownership of the integration question. That is not only top down, even like from a local government, it's less top down than national government, but it's still top down from a government point of view to include more both the newcomers and locals, whether it's through NGOs or migrant organizations or other kind of voluntary organizations, to include them in the decision-making process as well, and how to deal with integration questions and see if we can really do that together. Like if you look at the question of solidarity, that works on the European level, but I think also even within the city level, that's just not the city council or the city government, but include the people actually living in the city and see how they can contribute to the integration question, integration issues, and also make use of their experiences, and also of the newcomers themselves. They go through like the whole system and trying to find their way, and use like some kind of advisory board. We have like an advisory board of refugees in Amsterdam as well. And for the partnership for inclusion of migrants and refugees, there's a partnership under the urban agenda. We also had like a European advisory board of refugees. I think that's really important to, if you look, they're not really like a third party, but something outside of the more governmental system and include their feedback and insights as well.
Thank you very much. George? If you can unmute, please. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay, since we talked about funding, I would like to highlight two main issues. Since 2017, I'm aware of the efforts of the municipality of Athens to ensure funding for integration structures. Up to now, the efforts were successful. However, by being aware of that, while being aware of the concerns of municipalities as well, I would say that integration, there should be a proposal. Actually, I realized that the main argument for municipalities was how to ensure better access of municipalities to EU funding. That was the main thing. The other thing, which is a personal approach, has to do with shifting our mentality from integration, which is founded on project-based mentality. We always had to run before this mentality as a coordination team of the Athens Coordination Center and Cities Network. We always had to run before funding, meaning that in order to change culture, in order to train local societies on the importance of integration, of the productive integration, we need to shift away from project-based approach. Now, the thing is that we should also look on how to better use available funding. That's another issue. I think it's a European topic right now, even starting from environment or from integration or from integration issues. We need to see how we can ensure better access to local authorities while improving the management of available funding. So this is what I would like to add.
Thank you very much. That it actually partially covers, I think, a question that we also received, that it relates to the reality of project by project activities in the municipal level, which actually could refrain from going into creating a sustainable framework of integration and on working and all that. So many thanks on that. I don't know if you would like to, maybe Mr. Farmakis or Boselnager, would you like to comment on that? Or there are some other questions that I want to pose to the panel. So a more direct one to you, Mr. Boselnager. Do you think the EU action plan on integration and inclusion will be of any help to municipalities?
Thanks a lot. I have to say, I have to review the action plan still in detail when it comes to that. I'm not 100% sure I can answer this question very well at this point. I hope that there are elements in there, but I will have to pass for now. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So going back into how a lot of municipalities are working on a project by project level, there is always the issue of competencies. For example, Mr. Tubing talked a bit about how larger municipalities were taking the lead in the Netherlands of doing some activities and taking initiatives. So I understand also from my personal experience that we are not, all of us, we are not, all municipalities are at the same level. And this may actually create frictions when it is about from the simple thing of best practices sharing to joining an EU proposal for some funding or joining an activity. So how do each one of you, how do you understand this diversity of competences, and how do you believe this creates problems into moving forward? And how can the different parts from your views, from the European Parliament to the UNHCR, can work on that in order to provide some solutions? Feel free to just, yes, Mr. Farmakis.
Yes, thank you. I think very correctly, Sotiris, you identified that there is a disconnect, and we see that a lot, especially these last years, from a main governing body, let's say the European Union, Commission and Parliament, to local governments, whereas there are priorities set without really the consultation of important stakeholders like the municipalities, at least I'm talking about Greece, of course, and furthermore, local communities. So the example that you gave also before about advocacy efforts, of course, it's not included, but also very important elements like mental health, which is really a predominant now need, not only because of the lack of success for refugees response, but also because of during the COVID-19 pressure that we have in local populations. These are not included, and the government, at least in Greece, always likes to have the control of the priorities and the funding for obvious reasons, and doesn't even consult, and if it does, it's a very superficial consultation. So I think there has to be a lot of advocacy and pressure for local needs by, as much as possible, local communities to be included in that discussion and to see the tangible results of where this funding is going and what is the, let's say, the necessary requirements or regulations for this funding. Also, my last comment as well, see Damien and George have raised their hands, but my last comment is that a lot of times also we see this lack of flexibility in terms of reporting to the entity that is giving the funding. It's very complicated, and also there might be on needs a few years before previously. In other words, there is no current relation to the funding coming in and the actual needs on the ground, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Boschlager?
Yeah, I just wanted to fully agree. I think when we see both the design of programs, but also then the handling of the money, so the distribution of funding, it's very difficult to include the local level in the right way, even though there are some principles, the partnership principle and so on to do that. It feels like it's often a bit neglected. And the one issue that for me comes to my mind instantly is social housing. I think we often see now that social housing is one of the key issues also to provide support after the asylum procedures might even be done. And so I do believe that this is an issue, I think, where we need to find better ways of cooperating with the European level and the local level directly.
Thank you very much. George, I'm not sure whether you have raised your hand to talk or it was from the past, but more than happy if you would like to intervene.
Yeah, forgot it, excuse me.
Okay, no problem, no problem. Yeah, Niels, please.
Maybe a quick addition to what was discussed here. I think we do encounter those issues, like the access to funding from the local level. I mean, if you have more experience, it gets easier, of course, but there are many smaller municipalities who don't have either the available people to put the time into like application, let alone all the financial reporting. Like also the emphasis on the financial reporting as opposed to more like the content of what you actually do in the project. I think there should be more focus on the things you achieve as well. I mean, of course, it's important that the money is accounted for. But I think the balance sometimes tips a bit too much towards the financial direct reporting. But like what Damien also said, like the partnership principle, I think that is something that like cities throughout Europe can assist each other. Like if you apply for funding in the program together, like smaller municipalities who have less experience can piggyback then on like the larger municipalities. Something we try to do from Amsterdam perspective as well. Our previous mayor, who sadly passed away a couple of years, decided Amsterdam should be like a responsible capital, which meant like in the Netherlands, so we also assist other municipalities, but also on a European level. At the moment, we share our own knowledge and exchange best practices, but also be open to learn from other cities. And I think even if there's a big difference in what cities can do, like financial or like politically, I think you can still like learn from each other and assist each other. Like you can't often copy like projects or programs one-on-one, but you can like shift your perspective like even like a few degrees sometimes to uncover like blind spots or areas you hadn't thought of or specific target groups. So in that sense, either through projects for European funding or, for example, the Eurocities network. Sam is currently the chair of the working group for migration and integration. I think like over 40 cities are part of that, with many different backgrounds all over Europe. But still you can assist each other in talking about topics, highlighting issues and problems, and see how you can move forward for that. And it doesn't take away, of course, the an equal division with funding and opportunities and possibilities. But at least it can assist a little bit. I think even if you have less opportunities as a city, you can like join and get in touch with those cities to try to take that step. But it's of course a lot more difficult if your national situation gets more in the way than assist you in this sense. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this. I do agree that this kind of networks, solidarity can assist, enhance the competencies of cities that they are lagging a bit behind. At least in Greece, I know that that's the case. So there are needs and there is a lot of differences between different municipalities. So if I missed any of the questions, I'm trying to spot them, but I think that more or less they have been they answered. So I have something that I think that goes along most of them, at least in its main, in their spirit, at least. So if we agree that we need an enhancement of EU rules over what can the local level do, and whether we should provide them with more tools, that being funding, that being resources related to, for example, capacity building, or giving them the room in terms of the local or European legal framework. I understand that you need a lot of, if we do accept that that should be the way going forward, and if we again take note on the different advocacy campaigns that have been developing throughout these years, I was wondering how connected all these are. I'm not sure, and maybe you can all share something, and maybe also, Epaminondas, you can tell us a bit of how, because you extended your call for common ground into anyone around Europe. I'm not sure whether we have bottlenecks and how isolated the different advocacy campaigns are, and how we can see not just, for example, municipalities communicating with each other, but municipalities or the network of cities communicating with the Greens, for example, in the European Parliament, and how civil society organizations are also invited in that, or whether we see just different subsectors of the same ecosystem doing in more or less isolation the same more or less work in terms of campaigning and trying to change the framework on the European level. So I don't know if you have, I see that Damien has raised his hand, so you can go forward, but anyone else can join. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think your point is completely right. I tried to say it a bit clumsily in my introduction. The local level can really be the change maker for the European level. And I mean, while it's, I think, extremely important that obviously all initiatives do what they do best and also a bit of a, if you want, separated approach, I do believe when it comes to European positioning, European policy making, European advocacy campaigns, we can all benefit hugely from a coordinated approach. And I mean, the map that we're trying to put forward, and I guess there's similar initiatives around there, for us, it's really just trying to map all the great work that all municipalities are currently already doing, and to show and to basically transfer that into traction on the European level, to show the member states saying, like, what are you talking about when you're blocking? Because, I mean, look at all these cities in your country that are actually willing to go forward. And so for me, what's really important is, I think no one organization or so should, or let's say differently, I think it's super important to bundle our work all together in the best possible way, and to create big platforms where we think about the best advocacy campaigns that are somehow open for everyone to make them their own. So that it's not a branded campaign. The Greens EFA is doing a campaign, or it's not a branded campaign. Any single organization or city is doing a campaign, but that we really try to, you know, create these open kind of, if you want, even hashtags to agglomerate under that we can make all our own, and then almost be a bit separate again in the way we do it, but all paying into the same kind of you know, overarching message. I think that would be quite helpful to do such a strategy session with everyone interested. And this is, I mean, a great start in this forum, but maybe we can, if people are interested, we can think about a follow-up event where we really talk about shared strategies in that aspect. Because, I mean, currently it's really not moving. It's the opposite. It's moving backwards from where we wanted to go. And so I think it's really high time to bundle our forces.
Okay, that would be great. Epaminondas?
Yes, that's what Damien described is really excellent. I think in the past, too often NGOs and other groups were very protective of their funding, didn't want to open up this type of discussions because they were afraid there were going to be too many competitors, quote unquote, on this funding. Or they would make these campaigns very sort of personalized to a local, actually to a cause belonging to a particular NGO. And as Damien says, we have to find ways to make these campaigns for open to all groups that could find, you know, their own local, let's say, angle, or then take ownership of these campaigns. I believe this is one of the examples that I mentioned before. I mean, the environmental sustainability and making green the economy really affects all members of the EU. And this, let's say, recovery package would go to all the member states. So it could be a way to unify advocacy and approach on this matter. And I'll give you an example, as you very well remember, Sotiri, because you were also a part of it, of last March, when we had a few thousands of refugees try to enter Greece from the land border between Turkey and Greece in the Evros region. And Greece denied the right to seek international asylum. There was an initiative that was created by all of us that reached over 250 NGOs, not only from Greece, but from around Europe. So this is also an example of an approach that really affects a lot of our colleagues and let's say organizations in several European countries. When the rule of law is not applied by one member state, it should be advocated and campaigned by different partners that are sensitive to and believe in the right to asylum and the protection of human rights. Thank you.
Definitely, yeah. And I remember it was a great effort there. Niels?
Yes, thank you. Really, I think the things that I just said, towards like the city level again. Like when you look at EU regulation and funding, I think also what Damien has said, I think it's important that the voices of cities like are heard in that sense and taken into account on the European level, to see like the programs and funding they have, that they are actually applicable to cities so they can work with that. And like we also said, I think it's now more like almost like a rat race, like who wins the funding in different programs with all the, I mean, there's so many people and so many organizations, cities are writing these applications, and only like a couple are like awarded the fund. I'm not sure what would be a better way to distribute the funding, but like a little bit more of a direct access from cities would be, I think, very great in that sense. I think there's also a question in the chat from Tiomir on the project basis, which is always connected to this kind of fund almost. I think George also said something about it. It's a shame indeed that you, like I said in the beginning, integration is like a long-term issue. It's not like being solved in 2 years with an innovative approach. And so many applications form on trying to come up with new ideas. While the last 20 to 30 years, there are also a lot of ideas that have been proven to be very worthwhile and really work. So I think in this sense, like I said, people, human beings are not products that need to be innovated. They just need to be assisted in finding their way in a new society. So less focus on these innovative elements and just new projects. I think the question was also, do these projects sometimes come back to haunt you as a city? They can sometimes, because you develop something within the 2-3 years that is within the period of the funding you get money for within the program. And after that, the funding goes away again. And very often you don't have the financial means to continue what you just built up. So like in the end of the program, where you just have everything up and running, it's pretty much then time to, okay, now you have to report about it, and that's it. And especially when you work together with civil society and with small organizations, they really depend on that funding as well. So if it falls away, often the good practice falls away as well. So I think, that's something that should be taken into account in the coming years. How can we look more towards sustainable integration? Both on the national level, I think it's a discussion we have to have as well as cities, but also on the European level, because many of the great ideas within the action plan and the migration pact to focus on integration are not always possible to execute because of this. I mean, another question, like if the action plan was worthwhile or useful for cities, I think it can be in that discussion with national governments, for example. The action plan also mentions that member states be encouraged to use the funding for integration, make local regional authorities responsible for elements. It's not like a law or legislation that they have to do that. In many member states, but there's probably wipe it off the table. But at least it's an instrument to start a discussion. Like, look, the EU sees this as well. Cities around Europe think this is important. So you can use this as maybe as a political instrument to start discussions and open up funding for integration more to the local level in that sense.
Thank you very much, because you touched upon a lot of the questions raised in the chat, and definitely I agree on the project on a project level, and the fact, to be honest, that usually they have this part where you write on the sustainability of the project, but I don't think that anybody really gives a lot of attention into that. And after 2-3 years, then you are without funding and how to do it. By the way, in the US, a lot of the discussion, at least as part of the non-profits are related, is that funders should try to give more long-term framework funding than just on a project by project level way or process, because this seems to be more beneficial to actually creating more sustainable solutions into whatever it is out there. And yes, George, I'm giving you the floor, but just also to point out that, Niels, you mentioned again of how this we can use things decided on the EU level to initiate local or national discussions, and this is also a very important part of how one can use the European level to initiate processes in the national or local, even though the discussion in the EU doesn't give specific directives into changing things, but it can be used as an excuse, if you like. George?
Yeah, I would like to add that during the last years, we have seen that the member municipalities of CNI have made significant steps towards developing common tools, partnerships. However, we still see that during the last exercise we had, meaning the needs assessment, that a major question for them, one of the main priorities, has to do with access to funding, information, and partnerships. I'm saying this because it is important that despite the progress taking place at all levels, because nothing was for granted, everyone started from scratch, let's say, here in Greece. However, access to funding still remains a main priority and question for all the municipalities. I mean, it cannot always be bigger municipalities in Greece that can provide assistance to smaller municipalities. We need to see how how information can be channeled at all levels. This is another question as well.
Definitely, and thank you. By the way, I think that for the last couple of years, we see more funding going into the Green Deal and digital transformation projects. So I don't know whether there should be, as also Epaminondas was saying about the 72 billion that we are waiting for Greece and so many others coming to other European countries, whether also the notion of creating more sustainable processes and maybe placements within municipalities should be added. And I take that also, and I connected with Ms. Zobel's comment that they're preparing a proposal on how there is on the chat, and you can read it, to go directly, funding going directly to municipalities, and not just fund the placements for the reception of people, etc., but also the municipal development, which I think sometimes is being missed by all these project-shaped funding schemes. Definitely. So Niels, I don't know whether you want to raise a point or, okay, it was from the last intervention. So we have a bit of time, so please feel free either to put comments on the chat or any questions, or just address them to specific people. Just me. There is a comment regarding the turnover of people. I don't think it is the same. It is in the Netherlands. I know that the non-profit sector, it is there. I don't know whether it is on the municipalities. At least in Greece, it seems to be a bit stable. Nevertheless, and this is a question to George, is how do you see the future steps on the cities network? Is there any specific plan there, like a strategy plan or something on how to further proceed?
Indeed, there is a plan, because we wouldn't be over here right now. Thank you, Sotiris, for this question, because if I could summarize the progress, I would say that when we started, things were really difficult, meaning that municipalities were in a different speed, different capacity. However, during the last year, we see like quite promising things. Like we start to believe that, we start to realize that municipalities are working together with or without CNI. They have, there is some capacity out there. They have local practices which are significant. And there is some know-how that definitely boosts CNI at a whole. However, all the member municipalities and their representatives identify the need for moving away from project-based funding. Because I'll give an example. As soon as something happens within a few months, you know, then there is the risk of not ensuring funding for the next month. So we are always reluctant, you know, to really go fast. You know, that's an example. Therefore, everyone realized that now the legal, the CNI should go for a legal entity. I'm not sure if that will be successful, since this is an issue of a political issue and really involves 18 mayors and actors. However, we really look for a scheme that could ensure long-term funding. Therefore, that could either happen through structural funds or through by moving on with donors that are away from governmental level. Therefore, yes, there is a plan. We expect that CNI will come up with the next step during 2021. So that's it.
Quite interesting and promising. Damian?
Yeah, I wanted to comment on another thing mentioned in the chat, if that's fine for you.
Yep, of course.
Perfect. So I just saw that Melissa also wrote that they are currently thinking about how municipalities could be reimbursed for potentially voluntarily welcoming asylum seekers amongst them. And so I think that's an interesting idea of, how can we from all sides basically push this idea that municipalities are much further, and how can we make sure that we can somehow jump the national level, which is currently often blocking. And I think it's a very good idea to make this with a concrete policy proposal. So I would be very interested to see that and hear more about that.
Okay, yeah, but I think one of the great things with meetings and conferences like that is that you can bring together different ideas and different people and enhance a bit the networking and connectiveness among them. And by the way, because I see that there is such a movement, and maybe also CNI can play a role, I've witnessed the last couple of, I think it's 6 years at least, that we have seen these intelligent cities network challenge, or the digital cities challenge that have been hosted by the European Commission. I'm part, for example, in one city consortium that from Greece, that they are within the ICC, they call it Intelligent Cities Challenge. I've never witnessed something that could be related to the integration of the refugees, in general, of third country nationals integration into the local level. And most of these schemes are not so, at least in my view, very costly, because it's more about exchange of best practices, of having some people like that could be like Mr. or Mrs. Anchi points out, that they actually work as advisors or mentors to cities in order to embark into initiatives that are related, well, in my case, in the one that I'm mentioning about becoming more intelligent, using more digital components and things like that. So I'm just throwing that out there, whether you know something, or maybe it could be a good idea of pushing for a relevant scheme that is around integration and how municipalities could work into this subject. Niels, I don't know whether you want the floor or it's just left there, the raised hand.
No, I did raise it.
Okay, cool.
So much connected to your question right now, though. So maybe if somebody wants to answer this question first, that's also okay. Or maybe afterwards. I was wondering, and maybe I'm messing a little bit with the format here. I saw like a comment by Melissa Zoblo about reimbursement in the chat. I'm not sure like which organization she's from, but I was really curious if she could maybe extrapolate a little bit on that issue, because I think it's very interesting scheme that could be, because many cities put a lot of money into receiving refugees, reception centers, and starting the first spirit of integration. And if they, especially the reception, is not something you can first write a proposal for like a nice project funding that just happens. So you have to act right away. So you have to finance it right away as well. So if there would be some kind of scheme, like maybe on European level, that would create some kind of reimbursement for cities like this, I think that would be very interesting, especially for the cities in the southern Europe who have to deal with it a lot, of course, the reception. So I was wondering what that exactly would look like.
Yes, so if you can give us, Melissa, more intel or a bit of an overview of how, yes, please.
Sorry, I didn't want to take over the panel. Yes, it's a policy proposal that we've developed at the Humboldt-Viadrina Governance Platform, which is a Berlin-based NGO. And it was co-developed between a social democratic politician, Gesine Schwan, and a German Green politician, Franziska Brandner. And so it has been getting some traction within the German European debate, within the Greens and the Social Democrats, and there will be a legal assessment of how it can be done within the framework, probably within the next 2 months, so that we also have like a bit of a better idea what the legal limits or the legal challenges would be to actually implement this within the European framework. And yeah, I'm happy to send more information to anyone who's interested. Thank you for giving me the time.
Sotiris, I'm afraid you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Yes, okay, so I said thank you very much for your clarifications and further input. So yeah, and at least from my part, I would like to see a link or something if you have. There is also, sorry, but I have to just read it now. Okay, so there is a question from Ms. Pistovjian. In terms of funding structures, has there ever been a proposal to increase taxes on very healthy international investors in order to raise money for integration projects, or is there too much pressure to allow them to develop, or perhaps taxes on corporations, imposing environmental harms? And of course, the need, at least in Greece, to boost the economy could be a problem there. And thank you, Melissa, for putting out there the different points. And Damian also. So the issue of taxation, and I don't know whether there is something being discussed, at least in the municipal level, that you're aware of, or the European level. I mean, if you can share anything on that. I don't know also what are the ability to formulate taxation either on the national or the local level. So yeah, Niels.
Sotiris, just before we get the new round of responses very quickly, and before the panel is done, very quickly, there was a need to change a few things in our setup. I've shared the details in the chat, also through email. Things are getting a little bit complicated, and hopefully we will hang in there, because there is a lot of interest in the conference. So we needed to extend our Zoom scheme so we can invite more people. So I take this opportunity to also say this orally. The following session, starting at 12, has one link. use this. The one starting later on at 1:30 Central European Time, it has a second link, and the third one starting at 4 Central European has a third link. Keep in mind that we will stream the remaining sessions and panels on Facebook as well. So in case any difficulties are encountered, you could also follow from there. And one point about interpretation, you can see a little globe on the bottom of the page. Please use this to choose your channel. The interpreter said this before, but he could only say it in one channel rather than both. Okay, sorry for that, technicalities that are important. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. On live events, online events, this is usually the case anyway. So yeah, let's go back to that, and thank you. You can see on the chat the links that you can press for the rest of the day. Niels, you wanted to intervene?
Yes, thank you. With regards to the question on certain taxation for big companies or wealthy institutions, I'm not sure if you have it in other countries in Europe as well. In the Netherlands, we have something it's called like social return on investment. And if you have like a tender or like you want to acquire services from companies or other institutions, you can include that they need to do something socially as well, like either open up workspaces for people, do something else for civil society. It's not like a taxation per se, but in that sense, it is something you can demand or ask something to do something back for society as well, because they can thrive within the society because of all the other things that are regulated, of course, and financed. In that sense, you can tax them in a social way a little bit. So that's something that's obligatory in Amsterdam, even like from the city perspective, like everything that we acquire or the tenders we write out, that's a necessary element of it. So in that sense, you tax them a little bit in a social way. And maybe quickly to mention, because I think you asked Soturis about other kind of networks that enhance each other, cities over Europe. And not so much like on the intelligence or innovation scale, but the Seebrugge initiative from Germany. It also brings together like civil society alliances, some local governments as well, and institutions to try to create safe harbors around Europe as well. It's not so much organized from a governmental point of view, but more like from civil society. But governments can, or cities can, connect to that as well. And that's something we're looking into from Amsterdam perspective to see if we can maybe work together with initiatives like that. It also feeds a bit into the roadmap that Damien was talking about, like cities showing their willingness to take in refugees and help them. So I just want to quickly mention that initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very, very interesting. And very interesting the obligation that you have, at least in the city of Amsterdam, which seems quite interesting. It is like a taxation, but not a taxation. And it gives a motive or an incentive or something anyway, compulsory to go around and think about the social part of when you invest on something and not just the return on investment. And thank you for this. Okay, so I think, I don't know if anybody has any last comment before we wrap this up, and okay, a lot of final comments. So yes, let's start with Epaminondas and go as I see you on my screen. Epaminondas.
Yes, thank you again. It was very exciting to be with you today. Just wanted to make an additional comment on the taxation. Of course, we are very, very positive on this, and Greece has a very, let's say, old taxation system when it comes to taxing the wealthy or giving tax breaks for people that wish to donate funds to, for example, municipalities or NGOs or things like that. So it's very important to address that and to move forward on that. However, I would like to point out that it isn't really a question of more funding. It is a very political issue. For example, when the mayor comes out, or even better, the prime minister or the minister comes out and explicitly says the word integration, which hasn't happened in Greece for the last 6 years. And I'm not talking on a municipality level, but on a government, on a national level. Only that word, just a single word, would increase a lot the opportunities for integration. And so it is a lack primarily of political will. A lot of times, I dare to say, politicians are also afraid of the unknown, or of the negative reaction that they may receive, and they ignore sometimes, or they don't comprehend a lot of the positive things that would come from issues like integration and the benefits also to local economies, and of course, coming back to environmental sustainability. But it is very easy to say the words, but I don't think a lot of us understand really the meaning of the risks that we take if we continue to operate like this against the environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Epaminondas. Damian?
Yeah, just very quickly. I think, my overall thought is that obviously it would be great if, the Greek Prime Minister would use the word integration more often, but we live currently in a bit of a world of suboptimal, political landscapes. And that is the reality we face across all countries, also my own, Germany. And I think our way to solve this, or to at least try to tackle this, unless these governments obviously change, is to write positive stories. And positive stories can be written by those who are most credible to tell them. And that is, I think, you on the municipal level. I think there we can see the cases of integration. There we can see the cases of actually wanting to have a welcome culture, because it's actual people, talking to people. So that is where the actual, life is, where the positive stories exist. And I think, whatever efforts we can make to showcase these positive situations also takes a lot of fear away, because I think a lot of the fear, and why then politicians, even on the highest levels, fear then also to say something positive about immigration, is because there's the perceived chaos, and this chaos is, I think, what then drives people to the right wing or more conservative spectrum of immigration policies. So whatever we can do to somehow, further the positive debate, I think we should do. That's also why I think we should look at labor migration and positive examples of labor migration to just show also that while it's extremely urgent to tackle issues of asylum and of solidarity, there's also a good case for immigration in itself, and that this is a success story for Europe, and that we should really work on that. And that brings me back to the integration action plan that I have to read up on, thanks to the question that was posed to me again, because I think the perception of being a welcoming continent also comes from our ways of dealing with labor migration. So I think there's a general need on both these topics, on asylum systems, but also on labor migration, to really showcase your positive stories. And as I said, I would be very happy to be part of such an effort.
Indeed, and thank you for that. Nikos?
I have an open mic to share that we need to wrap it up, to keep a couple of minutes for tea break or coffee break or to pour some coffee for the participants, and also to change the link and make everything sure that everything goes well. Okay. So Sotiris, the floor is yours for the wrap up.
Yeah, thank you very much. So thank you everybody for joining us in this panel. Thank you for Niels, George, Damian, and Epaminondas for sharing their views, answers, being part of this conversation that I think that could be further developed. Do note that we have the new links, so follow them into the next panel. And thank you very much for your participation.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Joel.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you kindly. Bye.